this is a pretty incredible story. We now have leaked documents internally from the FBI, from its infamous COINTEL, that is its counterintelligence program, that the FBI has a history of using anarchist ideology, anarchism, to, in its own terms, quote, disrupt the left. This is from Freedom of Information Act, that is FOIA requests, FOIA, FOIA requests. I wrote a short blog post at Substack. In COINTELPRO, the FBI used anarchism to disrupt the left, attack Vietnam, and attack the Soviet Union. Here is a cartoon in a zine, an underground newspaper created by the FBI. I point out that there's a quote in this FBI internal document that says, quote, "The anarchist point of view is the most disruptive element in the new left and should be capitalized on in the most confusing ways." Here is the specific, this is the relevant segment of the internal FBI COINTELPRO document. "It is believed that the anarchist point of view is the most disruptive element in the new left and should be capitalized on in the most confusing ways." Here's another part of the FBI COINTELPRO document, and they say that they say the publisher and the writers should be strictly anarchist. And why? Why did the FBI want to create an anarchist newspaper? Because, quote, "the anarchist position could take any direction, such as an attack on Vietnam policies, as well as an attack on the Soviets in Czechoslovakia." So they recognize that anarchist talking points and ideology can be used to attack the anti-imperialist left on Vietnam, to attack the Revolutionary National Liberation Front. This was during the war in Vietnam, by the way. So it could be used to attack Vietnam and also to attack the Soviet Union. So this is what the newspaper they created looked like. It was called The Workshop. This was like a kind of anarchist underground magazine, newspaper, zine, if you will, called The Workshop. You can see their cartoon there. And we know this because it was published by this researcher, Robert Skvarla. And he has a good Twitter thread looking at these documents that were released from the FBI, from its COINTEL operation. He also points out that it was targeted against the black left, the Black Power movement, and Pan-Africanists and anti-imperialists like Stokely Carmichael, also known as Kwame Ture. So we see an example of the FBI using ultra-left talking points, anarchism, to destabilize, to disrupt the left, in its own words, and specifically targeting anti-imperialists and targeting Pan-Africanists and Black liberation movement leaders. Here is this really good Twitter thread from Robert Skvarla from looking at COINTELPRO. In the late 1960s, the FBI attempted to subvert new left media by creating their own underground comics and newspapers. Their goal was to discredit Students for Democratic Society, SDS, and promote infighting among left-wing groups. So we can see an example of, this is a 1969 memo from internal FBI documents released through FOIA. And we see a comic they made it to destabilize SDS. Here's their comic, the anarchist comic they created to attack anti-imperialists, to attack the Soviet Union, to attack Vietnam, and to disrupt the left. Here is another example. This is a document from the FBI's COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program. And they created something called Armageddon News, and it was targeting the anti-war movement to destabilize and disrupt the anti-war movement at Indiana University. And what was their strategy? They said that they wanted to expose the truth within our anti-war movement at Indiana University. They complained that last semester that people from the Committee to End the War in Vietnam gave a series of lectures on socialism and the Communist Manifesto. The lecture was given in part by an officer of the Young Socialist Alliance. And they say that let's not be duped by their name. They're talking about the anti-war movement, the Committee to End the War in Vietnam. Let's not be duped by its name. This is the FBI speaking. It is no longer a committee to end the war in Vietnam, no longer a forum for just dissent. It's a recruiting ground for subversion. So we see how the FBI was trying to encourage division within the anti-war movement, to weaken and disrupt the left and the anti-war movement as a whole by red baiting, by attacking socialists and communists. And their slogan was, don't let the new left win the Armageddon at IU, Indiana University. So we see, going back decades, the 1960s, the FBI targeting the anti-war movement, targeting anti-imperialists, using ultra-left talking points, using anarchist talking points, and also they even created, as he pointed out, a Maoist, an extremely anti-Soviet Maoist ultra-left magazine to also attack anti-imperialists and to attack the Soviet Union. And ironically, this Maoist outlet that the FBI created as part of COINTELPRO, ironically, it later on ended up absorbed into a right-wing pro-Ayn Rand, extreme, like ultra free market fundamentalist magazine called The Rational Observer. So we see how the FBI exploits ultra-leftism, anti-imperialism, if you will, anarchism, Maoism. It exploits these talking points, these movements, these ideologies to destabilize, to disrupt the left in its terms, and specifically targeting the anti-war movement. Finally, there was one other comment here that was very important. This is another memo from the FBI's office in San Antonio to the director of the FBI, of the Bureau, in 1969. And you can see here that the San Antonio FBI office wrote that it, quote, feels that disruption within the ranks of the new left it feels that from time to time steps can be taken to cause disruption within the ranks of the new left, to expose them. So we see a blatant campaign to destabilize the left, targeting anti-imperialists, the anti-war movement, Students for a Democratic Society, Black liberation activists. And if you believe that COINTELPRO ended, I'm sorry, you're very naive. You can especially believe that now with social media, the power of social media, of Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, and using bot accounts, anonymous accounts spreading fake news, demonizing groups. We've seen this recently, actually. We've seen a coordinated campaign demonizing one of the most important anti-war and anti-imperialist groups in the United States, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. There's a concerted smear campaign against them. You can bet that in all of these campaigns today, especially by anonymous Twitter trolls and Facebook trolls and anonymous YouTube accounts spreading fake news and questionable half-true news and distortions, you can bet the FBI, the U.S. police state, is still very active in infiltrating to try to disrupt the left, especially the anti-imperialist movement, the anti-war movement, to prevent anti-imperialists from being able to organize. The FBI was doing it back in the 1960s. It's very obvious that the FBI is still doing it today. We know that the FBI has been spying on and infiltrating Black Lives Matter, and specifically the left wing, not the pro-Democratic Party, the NGO, nonprofit industrial complex wing of the self-appointed leaders of Black Lives Matter, who appointed them leaders even though they never were community leaders, who got jobs at big corporate foundations and as part of the nonprofit industrial complex. Not them. We know because of reporting and FOIA requests and leaks that the FBI has been spying on the grassroots leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement, grassroots Black liberation leaders, and you can bet that they're absolutely still doing the same against the anti-imperialist movement and the anti-war movement.